Before we begin, let me ask you something gently without expecting an answer. Have you ever felt tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix? Not exhausted from effort, but worn down by repetition, by expectation, by the quiet pressure to appear fine. Tonight's story isn't about war, kings, or revolutions. It's about kitchens, medicine cabinets, and the invisible emotional labor that filled suburban homes in the 1950s. So settle in, lower the lights, let the noise of the day fade. This is not a story that rushes anywhere. In post-war America, the suburbs were marketed as paradise, rows of tidy houses, lawns clipped to perfection, a promise that if you followed the rules, everything would fall into place. A husband with a job, children with clean faces, a wife with a smile that never slipped. But history often lives in the gap between what is advertised and what is lived. The 1950s housewife was expected to be calm, capable, endlessly patient, and unfailingly pleasant. Her workday never officially began and it never truly ended. Cooking, cleaning, child-rearing, hosting, shopping, socializing, repeating. Every task measured not just by completion but by demeanor. You weren't just meant to do the work, you were meant to enjoy it. And enjoyment, it turns out, is easier to prescribe than to cultivate. Doctors of the era rarely asked about fulfillment. They asked about nerves, about sleep, about irritability. A woman who felt overwhelmed wasn't considered oppressed or overstimulated. She was considered unbalanced. The solution wasn't rest or redistribution of labor. It was calm, manufactured calm. Tranquilizers entered the suburban home quietly. They weren't framed as medicine for illness but as tools for modern living. A way to smooth the edges of a demanding day, a way to remain pleasant, sociable, acceptable. This wasn't scandalous, it was normal. A pill before hosting, a pill before bridge club, a pill before another afternoon alone with a ticking clock and a silent house. These medications didn't erase responsibility. They made responsibility feel distant, manageable, softened. The brilliance of this system was that it never challenged expectations. It simply medicated the discomfort they caused. Every morning followed a familiar rhythm. Breakfast prepared, children managed, husband sent off to work, and then silence. A silence that stretched from mid-morning until late afternoon. Not peaceful silence, but empty silence. A house cleaned twice over. A radio turned up just to hear another human voice. Loneliness in the 1950s was rarely named. It was disguised as housekeeping. And yet appearances mattered. Neighborhoods were communities but also stages. Every window a display, every visit a performance. You weren't just living your life. You were demonstrating competence. Bridge clubs weren't just games, they were social audits. PTA meetings weren't just about schools. They were arenas of polite power. Church wasn't just worship, it was visibility. And in all of it, composure was currency. What's fascinating is how collective this experience was, yet how privately it was endured. Women often assumed they were failing individually, not realizing the pressure was systemic. The powder room became the only place where honesty briefly surfaced. Quiet exchanges about side effects, dosages, doctors who always smiled and never asked too much. There was solidarity, but it was whispered. Popular media reinforced the narrative relentlessly. Magazines promised happiness through organization, through beauty, through effort. Television showed families whose problems wrapped up neatly in half an hour. Commercials suggested that serenity was a purchase away. If you weren't happy, it wasn't the structure of your life. It was you, and there was always something new to try. The deeper truth is that many women weren't failing at domestic life. Domestic life was failing them. But that language didn't exist yet. So instead, calm became the goal. Not joy, not fulfillment, calm. The day moved on, lunches served, afternoons endured. Children returned home like a storm breaking the quiet, homework mediated, snacks rationed, emotions managed like inventory. Evenings followed ritual, dinner on time, conversation kept light, fatigue disguised as grace. Cocktail hour softened the edges again, this time socially sanctioned. And finally night, television glowing, laughter canned and predictable, a borrowed sense of ease, bedtime routines negotiated, children asleep, silence returning heavier than before. It's in those late hours that history gets honest. Standing alone in a bathroom, looking into a mirror, seeing the effort behind the smile, wondering who you are when no one is watching, when you're not calming someone else, when you're not holding things together. That question lingered, unanswered in thousands of homes. Eventually, culture shifted. The pills didn't disappear overnight, but conversations began. The dissatisfaction gained a vocabulary. What had been treated as a personal weakness was slowly understood as a social imbalance. Looking back now, it's easy to judge, but history isn't a courtroom, it's a mirror. The women of the 1950s were not weak. They were resilient within a system that demanded everything and offered very little in return. They adapted the only ways available to them. They survived. And survival deserves acknowledgement. As you rest tonight, consider this gentle truth. History isn't only made in moments of loud resistance. It's also made in quiet endurance, in unseen labor, in the ways people cope before they are allowed to question. You are not alone in your tiredness. You never were. And tomorrow can be different precisely because someone once whispered, "This isn't working," and dared to imagine something more. For now, let your mind soften. Let the day release you. History will still be here in the morning. Good night.